they say that being a parent is easy. Doing literally anything else while being a parent is hard. And of course, I think we'd all quibble with being a parent being easy all the time.
Hello and welcome to the Dad Dialogue Podcast, the show where we talk about the successes and the stresses of becoming a dad and being a dad. My name is Laurence. Thank you so much for being with us today. Before I introduce today's guest, a quick reminder, you can go over to daddialogue.co.uk if you'd like to get in touch with the show or sign up to be a guest on a future episode. Joining me today is Wes. Wes is based in the US and he is the father to one son. And during our conversation, we talk a lot about how Wes's wife went through quite a serious health journey and how Wes had to balance providing for his son and providing care for his wife, all while being quite far away from home during the process as well. We also touch a little bit on Wes's faith life and how that impacted that journey as well. It was a really insightful conversation, something that I found was super valuable to hear from. You know, we wouldn't wish this sort of trauma or health problems on anyone in anyone's situation, but unfortunately it is something that happens, and learning about how someone came through that and managed those decisions, I found is a really positive thing to listen to. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into the conversation. So Wes, thank you so much for joining us here on the Dad Dialogue Podcast. Can you just start off by telling our listeners just a little bit about yourself and your family?
Yeah, absolutely. So I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and have lived there most of my life, except for a little bit of time in university in East Tennessee. I work for a global tire company, Nokian Tires, a Finnish company that nobody's heard of here in the United States yet, but I work in marketing, so that's the job. I live here with my wife and my son, who's 4 years old. His name is Cameron. My wife is Lisa. We've been through some interesting, to say the least, family adversity here over the last year or so, but I'm in a place right now where I'm very hopeful and growing every day, sometimes learning things the hard way, and happy to be with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, I've obviously know a little bit about your story, so I'm really interested to kind of dive into that in a little bit. But the first thing I wanted to actually ask off the back of that was, is your kid still interested in trains? Because I remember listening to your episode with Devon on now called the Imperfect Dads podcast, and it just seemed to keep coming back to trains. You must have mentioned trains in that episode like 10 times or something. So is Cameron still into trains?
He has only grown more obsessed since that interview. Yes. And we can talk a bit as much as you want about my wife's healthcare journey, but it took us to Omaha, Nebraska for 2 months last year. And Omaha is maybe the train capital of the United States for various reasons. And so, you know, it was a tough couple of months, but one bright spot certainly was that we had all kinds of train museums to visit. And, you know, the every museum seemed to have a train component to it. And actually for Easter, we went on a train journey here in Tennessee. The passenger train situation here is not very good, but we do have a small little vintage passenger train that does excursions on weekends. And so we took him out for an Easter egg hunt in a small town an hour and a half away. He loved it. So yes, he is still as into trains as ever.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I have two sons. The oldest one is 4 as well. And he is very much into trains. And I feel like that when they're kind of 2 and 3, they're showing their interest in something and then they kind of double down on it, right? Like, so like if they're showing a bit of interest in trains, like three to the transition from 3 to 4, that's when they're going to like either like, I'm really into trains, or like, nah, I don't care about trains anymore.
No, that's for babies.
Exactly. But it sounds like he's doubled down. He's going to learn all about the big ones as well. So that's awesome.
He has. Isn't it amazing when our children want to specialize in something, how passionate they get and how detailed they get? It shows certainly that their minds are capable of so much when they dig into a particular subject and all of a sudden they know 10 times more than you do. It's a lot of fun to witness that. It's humbling, but it's really enjoyable to witness them specialize and dig down. And it's fun how we can learn about the way their minds work through following their passions.
Definitely. And not to drag on the trains for too much, but one of the things that you mentioned in that other episode was kind of like watching them play with trains or building a track or something. And I really resonated with it because I remember getting like our first set of train tracks for my son when he was just before he turned 2. And obviously at that point, it was like I was building it, putting it together. And my wife always like pokes fun at me. I was like, how much of this is for them and how much of it is it for you? I was like, yeah. I see where you're coming from. You know, like my dad used to have a model railway in our attic that he would like show us every now and then. So yeah, maybe it is for me. But then there would be a case of like, as our collection grew and grew and grew, and as he got a bit older, we had all the battery powered trains and all the bridges and all, you know, and then it would be like, we would create this elaborate train track, but it might be mostly me. But now over the last like kind of 6 months or so, I just see him just go wild at it. Like he doesn't need my help. He's just
Yeah.
like, I can see a problem's about to happen, but I don't say anything, and he's going to solve that problem himself because he's going to figure it out as he goes along. And that kind of like working out where to give that input in. It sounded as though there was a kind of a similar thing that you were mentioning.
Yeah,
Do you resonate with that at all?
isn't that such a challenge? Like learning where to let them fail
Mm,
safely or work through problems, or even, at the end of a long day of work, and he's been at school and he comes home, and I want to show that I'm a very present dad and play with him. But sometimes the best thing I can do is, as you've mentioned, to take the hands off, to keep a close ear, to listen to what he wants to say about it, but to let him do the solo playtime. And it's fun. That's kind of his decompression hour as well, right? And we always think about ourselves after a long day of work needing maybe a cup of coffee or a beer or a chance to sit in quiet. But I don't think about my kid needing that, as high energy as he is, but that train time for him is that. And even, sometimes we don't do a lot of screen time, but that's the time when I feel like it's really acceptable to do it, right? Is the end of a long day. Let him have an hour, and he wants to watch train videos. He's unboxing videos. It's so funny, like how into those videos these kids are. And then the other day I was putting together, actually not a train thing, but a Hot Wheels thing. And he had seen a Hot Wheels unboxing video, and he was telling me how to do it. And it is fun when they have that solo time to absorb and to process. It's easy for us to feel a bit guilty that we're not sitting down being present with them. There's plenty of time in the day where we will need to be present with our kids, but it really is rewarding to see them do their own form of world building, if you will, and put together this elaborate setup, talk to themselves, sing to themselves, name their trains, and then you better believe when he calls me over and wants to show it to me, that's great too, because then he does want to share that with you, and that's a special thing.
That's the time to shine, isn't it? Yeah, when they
Yes, it
start
is.
asking. And I think, seeing that stamina as well build over time is I find really interesting, because my older son, he loves to build, and like he doesn't even really like to play with the trains on them anymore. Like he doesn't seem as interested in that. He's like, all right, I'm gonna build. I was like, hey, look, I've made this cool train track. I'm like, all right, cool. Are you gonna get the trains and start playing with it? It's like, no, I'm gonna
No, I'm
change
going
it
to knock
again.
it
It's like,
down.
all right,
I'm going to knock it
yeah,
down.
all right, you do
Exactly.
you, buddy.
Yeah,
So
it really is. It is so enjoyable to see their minds grow and develop when we have a common standard against which to hold them, right? That we see
yeah.
them do the exact same thing at 2 and at 3 and now at 4. And man, it's really gratifying to see that growth.
Yeah, and I think that kind of having that approach into all the different areas of parenting is also just important. I'm using trains as something that's like hopefully identifiable for people, but just about the screen time, the thing that my kids sometimes, it pops up on YouTube sometimes when we bring up, and it's just like random train stunt videos where like some dude has like got a wooden train set and he's just like doing like close-ups of like, and the trains are doing like barrel rolls and loop the loops, and they're just like, whoa, and it's just like just incredible, or the crazy Lego train sets that are just like going around someone's house for 20 minutes, and they're just like, they're just glued to it. It is it's fascinating to see what they latch onto.
It is, and whatever the medium may be, I think you bring up a good point that, of course, trains are just the vehicle to discuss the larger growth trajectory that you see as a parent, the intentionality of play and the benefit of play toward helping them grow their vocabulary, their sense of the world around them, their reactions to things, and it's great also for them to get to experience something other than just our example. I mean, it's we want to set a great example. We want them to learn from us and see from us, but there's a reason that I'm not just like my dad or my mom, or vice versa. We have similarities, but we're able to bake in our own personal elements of our personality, and I think it comes from things like that, and discovering things for yourself. And even in an age at 4 where he's entirely dependent on us for his needs and for everything, it's a good reminder that he's not entirely dependent on me for his identity, nor should he be.
Yeah.
And so whether it's trains or Hot Wheels, or he started to be into sports a little bit, he knows nothing about them. He thinks baseball is football and vice versa. But I think, having his opportunity to explore those things for himself just a little bit, apart from me being right there with him every second, is very healthy. And
Yeah.
again, I have to remind myself that that independent time is actually sometimes more valuable than him just
Yeah.
listening to me gab in his ear all day.
Yeah. And I think that allows us as parents to also be more intentional with the time that we do spend with them, and to, like, you know, cause if the time is less, then you're able to really be present in the moment and ask good questions and get that out of them. Because I think as fathers, we all want to raise kids that are better than us in certain, you know, in every aspect
Yeah.
it is. But I just don't think we as parents of 4-year-olds maybe expect that to happen straight away. It was like, oh, is this kid already more creative than I am? Like, all right, fine, fine. He's already surpassed me in this area. Oh, he's already funnier than me. Okay, you know, I thought I was going to hold on to this a little bit longer than 4 years, but
Yeah.
all right, buddy, you do you.
They don't tell you that, do they? I thought I had like
No,
8 or 9, you know?
yeah,
It's like it's fun to have a kid, you know, at 4 still very much idolize his parents, but at the same time surpass them in certain areas and certainly
exactly.
challenge them as 4-year-olds love to do and push those boundaries. It is fun to be able at this stage to sit down and have a conversation and feel like I'm gaining more than just love and companionship, but actually gaining intellectually sometimes from my chats with my 4-year-old. He comes into school and his teachers say, "We can't believe the things he just already kind of knows." Like you know, like not like random facts and things. I'm like, oh, that's not due to his dad being smart for sure. That's due to his own curiosity.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, you mentioned sport. Just you said how he thinks baseball is football. We were in a hotel the other day. Like, we had some family visits, so we were like helping them check into the hotel, and on the television was hockey, like field hockey, not ice hockey, because hockey's
Yeah.
quite big here in the Netherlands.
Hmm.
And understandably, they saw it and they're like, football, football, obviously like soccer. And, like, you know, there is a pitch with 2 goals and a ball going around it. I was like, okay. It's like, but do you see that they're holding these big wooden sticks? Like, they're not hitting the ball with their foot. It's completely different. And they just kind of looked at me like, are they going to score a goal? It's like, well, maybe.
Yeah, there are goals in both.
But yeah, we had a little chat about sport. Like, how is he now approaching sport and kind of finding some home in sport?
In the best possible way, which is that it's a tool for his togetherness and curiosity, because that is not something that he can necessarily navigate on his own right now, and he has a million questions. And I think sports are at their best a tool for companionship and togetherness. Goodness knows they're not a tool for personal pride in my team's championships. As an Arsenal supporter, hey, as we talk about this, actually, the first semifinal leg of the Champions League is today, as far as Arsenal's been since I've supported them. However, for the most part, it's not about success; it's about that togetherness and companionship. And that's what I had with my dad. I'm a big American football fan, and university football is just massive here. And every Saturday, almost in the fall, we would travel either to Knoxville, where my team played, or to another city in the southeastern United States and watch the team. And we were pretty good, but we only won one championship in my entire childhood. It was about that time together. It was about the chance on a Saturday or a Sunday to just have a day and have something to talk about. Because I feel like as men, even as boys and dads, sometimes we need that external thing to talk about, to connect over versus just connecting with. But in the process, we're connecting with. And that's where he is now, which is just a delight. I took him to some baseball games last summer when we were in Omaha. We plan to go to some football matches here in town. Nashville Soccer Club is growing in popularity, and I've done some work with that club. And he approaches it as a chance to just learn and explore. And I also have to be careful because when I dislike a team, I have to make sure he knows I don't dislike the people for the most part. We have some neighbors who just moved. Yeah, our big rival in college football, university football, is the Florida Gators, and we have some neighbors who just moved to Florida. And he said, "Oh no, Daddy, they're moving to Florida. They're not going to have to cheer for the Gators, are they?" And I hated to tell him, you know what? Actually, they already do. I'm sorry, they were already Gator fans. So, like, I think that's also fun too. Is that their sense of good and evil is huge, right? If I don't like a team, it's probably because they're bad people, and of course we have to temper that. And so it's a fun way to help him understand too. There are different levels and areas of emotion, and that if I'm yelling at my team for sacking a quarterback, it's not going to make or ruin my day. So it's a chance to bond with him, to spend time talking about something, but also to show in some small way an example of how to handle emotion. And again, there he's
Mm.
learning what not to do for me as much as he's learning what to do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like the way you've kind of like you've put it there, because I think trying to explain sports and maybe the positives it can bring to people is quite difficult. If like for my wife isn't really super into it, so like she's very happy that I like football. But when we first got together and we were like dating and stuff, I'd kind of like fallen a little bit out of football. I wasn't really super into it, and then went for quite a long time and then moved away from England. So like I kind of naturally kind of drifted away from a lot of sport. So I know for some people who aren't really into it, it can just kind of be like, but why? Or why do you say we? Like, oh, we lost last night or we won last night. It's like it's not like, you're not on the team. It's like, yeah, but I've been through, we've been through the ups and the downs, and like when you support a team for so long, you can't just leave it away. You can't just leave it to one side, like no matter what the connection is. And I think the way you described it there of like kind of letting kids come into that from the positive side of things is really, really, really useful. But I have a lot of memories of my own dad, and even memories for myself as a teenager of like maybe going way too far with the emotion. Let's
Yeah.
say of like shouting at the TV and like getting completely irate, and it's just crazy, absolutely crazy. Even just like you mentioned the Arsenal games coming up just this weekend, and I don't know if you would have seen it, but in Spain, in the Spanish Cup final, one of the Real Madrid players like absolutely lost his mind on the touchline, started throwing stuff for the referee, and like these are the things that are on television that kids will be seeing,
Yeah.
and you hear about it like trickling down through the different systems, and like refereeing on like a Sunday league team, like a kids team and stuff. Like these referees will end up getting treated in a similar way. So
Hmm.
maybe we can just talk a little bit about, have you gone through like a personal journey of like ensuring that your emotions around sport are positive?
Yeah, I've tried, and I think because it is such an opportunity to teach our children what it means to belong to a tribe, right? I
Mm,
think sports is a proxy in so many ways for politics or for religion or for family relationship in some ways. How can I belong to a tribe and support that tribe and be there through thick and thin and never leave it,
mm,
but also be willing to question it, to criticize it, to not just wholeheartedly accept that everything my tribe does is always perfect.
mm,
Again, there, not hard to come to the realization that Arsenal's not always perfect. But I think that yes, it is a challenge, especially when it comes to teams that I'm deeply passionate about.
mm,
I can sit and watch a ice hockey game and be like, oh no, we lost. Oh well, what's for dinner? But when it is a team that I deeply care about, I've had to catch myself for sure, because again, he doesn't always distinguish between the importance of the emotion that I might be,
mm,
yelling at a referee, but he doesn't understand. I'm not calling that referee evil. I'm still
mm.
wishing the best for his family and his health and all of that. I just wish he had better glasses. Uh,
Yeah.
so yes, I think it's a chance to help him experience before he's old enough to really grasp a lot of loftier concepts or be at all into politics or religion or any of that. What does it mean to be a part of a group? How
Mm,
can I support that group with everything I have while also not letting it be my entire identity?
mm.
And that's a tough trade-off that we adults are still sometimes learning, even through something as ultimately trivial as sport.
Yes, yes, I that's a very good way to put it. And I think my oldest son, he can be a bit sensitive at times, and even if I'm just watching football, and even if I like if Newcastle score and I shout and cheer like yes, like not even like crazy, that sometimes he'll be on the other side playing whatever, and he'll be like, oh, I'm scared, and like start like he'll get visibly upset, even though like I'm displaying like a passion and a positive emotion.
Yeah.
So that is even like a reminder of like I have to be really mindful of displaying emotion too much. And yeah, like I look back on times when I was like younger and like would lose my mind, like lose my marbles, like before getting married and stuff, and like want to start hitting things and punching things and getting so angry about it. So yeah, for me, like it's super important now. Like if we Newcastle lose a big game, it's the one sport I'm into. Like I take myself off into a little room, like right, that's done. Take a deep breath, say a little
Decompress. That's good.
prayer, say like just say, God, I'm not going to let this like impact me and my kids. I'm just going to move on, and they're still going to get the best of me, like no matter what the
Oh yeah.
result is.
Aren't those moments
Um,
so vital? I took my son to a a game in the college baseball national championship. It was in Omaha when we were in Omaha. And this is, again, university sports being so big in the States. We had 20, 25,000 people at this game. And my team happened to be there and actually ended up winning the national championship for the first time ever. And so it was a special moment for us. For the first game, we were losing 12-8. And we came back and had this miraculous win. And we stayed up way past his bedtime. And finally, I was like, you know what? Your attention span is depleted. It's been 4 hours. It's your first ever Tennessee sporting event. Here's my phone. Watch some trains on my phone while I'm watching this pivotal moment of the game. And we won. And we won at the last second. And so I took my phone, I picked him up, and I started just scream crying in a happy way, ah. And afterward I said, Cameron, what do you think of that game? Because for me, it was one of the most special experiences of my sports life and of my parenting life, experiencing it with him. And he said, Daddy, you sang too loud in my ear and you took away my train video. I am laughing and screaming and he's crying and he's almost jarred by it. And I think in time, I don't think he was traumatized or anything, but in time we'll laugh about the fact that this special moment that Tennessee fans will remember for decades, he was crying because I was being a little bit too loud in his ear.
Wow. Well, just so I remember hearing a part of your story. We can kind of transitioning into the story about your wife's health struggles and health journey. You had mentioned that it was whilst you were abroad, right, visiting England and going to the Emirates. So that must have been such just a huge dichotomy of ups and downs of getting to experience a trip. And then did you get a call whilst you were away about what was going on?
So I knew my wife was feeling a little bit off. I was in Washington, D.C. for business and flew from there to London. And right before I left, she said, I'm going to go to the doctor and just get a feel for what's going on. She'd felt some fatigue and we thought maybe there was something to do with anemia or something that, not anything significant, but something important to address. And so I said, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to come up to you? And she said, no, go on your trip. Enjoy your time. It was my brother who was already over there. So we went and saw Arsenal beat Liverpool at the Emirates. This was February of 2024. I flew back 2 days later and arrived in Ottawa, Canada, which is where my wife was visiting. She's from there. Her mom lives there. And so we were at a cottage about an hour and a half north of Ottawa. That's where she was. I went and met her there. And actually, she picked me up on her way back from a doctor's appointment. And about 3 days later, learned that the test they performed indicated a very strong chance that she had leukemia. Which was nowhere on our radar. I mean, it was a genetic mutation. It was nothing that she did that, anything like that. This just happens. And it's actually, this particular leukemia is very common in young women, women in their 20s and 30s. And so she had the genetic mutation. It was emergent, which people ask what stage of cancer was it? And there's not really a stage to that kind of leukemia. It's get to the hospital now. Because what it does is it turns your blood cells against you in rapid fashion. And whereas there is often time to treat cancer, in this case, what you do is you get to the hospital and you go through basically 2 weeks of urgent around-the-clock treatment, blood transfusions, chemotherapy. And then once you're past that highest risk stage, it's actually, they call it the good leukemia to get if you have to get one. It's called APL. And once you're past that earliest phase, it's actually quite easy to manage and to treat. And the prognosis is very good. And so I'm happy to get into other elements of her journey and how it almost became very tragic. But to answer your question, it was extreme emotional whiplash to go from really one of the best moments, honestly, of my life. Not because Arsenal beat Liverpool, which was great, but because I was spending it with my brother. We had always dreamed of traveling to London to a match. We'd never done that together. So this extremely special moment, while in the back of my head knowing, I hope my wife can get this figured out and it's something minor. And then, of course, the guilt that comes with getting to Canada and realizing this was actually something extraordinarily serious. And I was off having fun in London. There's no way we could have foreseen that, of course, but it was a wild swing of emotion, especially when, Cameron was in the mix. He was in Canada with my wife, and we had a couple days of anxiety there. And again, thinking, the doctor had said at one point, this is just stress, bring some herbal tea, but we'll do some tests just in case. So she knew it wasn't just stress, but we couldn't have
Wow.
grasped how serious it was. And so I will always remember there's going to be a phone call. It was going to be on a Thursday, and we were anxiously awaiting the call with the results. And I remember playing with my son outside, and just, I hadn't seen him in about a month at that point because I'd been doing some work travel. I'd spent some time, all over the States. And so I was just enjoying him and trying to distract myself by just taking
Mm,
delight in his delight and his naivete and innocence. And we didn't tell him any of this stuff at that point. So we didn't know yet, but yeah, it was 2 to 3 days later that we got the news. We need to get to
right.
the hospital an hour and a half away, and we don't know when. Like pack a suitcase. We don't know when we're going to be coming back. So it was. So what it means is I'm looking back at pictures now from that trip, and it's two feelings, right? Number one is it was the last time I felt normal, like I had a normal life. It was that trip,
Mm,
visiting with my brother, having a wife that we knew something was going on. We couldn't have imagined it was life threatening or anything close to that nature. She was just like really tired, right? Like it wasn't like she was having
mm,
a hard time breathing or anything. Like, it was just she was just really tired. So number one, it's the last time that things really felt normal. And number
mm,
two, it's a time that I would look back on during the worst moments, and I would just lean on the joy that I felt there and borrow from that reservoir of happiness at a time when I was going through, for a few months, something fairly unspeakable because she was. And
yeah.
it was, yeah, really a bizarre confluence of emotion.
Mm. I would like to kind of draw a little bit more out of this story, if you're okay, because
Sure.
I've always these are some of the questions that I often take to like my life of like reflection, and oftentimes, and I feel as though like I've gone through the thought process of like what if I like get sick. Like I feel like I've because my own dad got sick and passed away when I was quite like in my early 20s, so like I've kind of
Mm.
gone through that thought process for a long time, and I've kind of like played out different scenarios in my head, but like the scenario of my wife getting very sick is nuts. Just like that's you just don't think about it because it's just
Yeah.
you don't really think about mortality in that sort of way. And I think hearing these sorts of stories, I had a guest on a long time ago, I think about episode 10, who had similar stories. His wife was in the hospital for a very long time, having like trouble with like blood clots and things, and had to have like multiple surgeries, and just going through all this stuff of like not knowing what's happening and like trying to balance life between her and like kids and things. And I just, these sorts of stories, I think, really help challenge us as fathers of like, I'm not saying that people listening to this need to prepare for this situation going to happen. Like we wouldn't wish it on anyone. But
You
I think just
can't.
hearing
Yeah.
these stories is a really vital part of life because it happens to people. And I think
Hmm.
it's just, it can help us think about things. It can help us process things and help us become a little bit more prepared for something. And so that's why I do really like hearing these sorts of stories, as I'm sure as traumatic as it must have been for you and your wife. Um, so how did you break the news to your son if like she's now going to a hospital, you don't know how long she's going to be there for? Like, is that the moment you kind of say something's going on with mum?
Yeah. And he was, 3 at the time,
Mm,
3.5, like young, and so he was never going to grasp everything. But I will always remember the moment that she was hugging goodbye to him, to go to the hospital. And of course he's like, okay, there's no concept of time, right? I'd just
yeah.
gone for a month, and I might as well have gone for 2 days. He doesn't know, or a year, who knows? Like, and so we just told him, mommy is sick. She's going to the doctor to feel better, and then she's going to the
Mm,
hospital to feel better. And a little context. I mean, I work full time. She quit her job and was full time mom with
mm.
him. And so, I used to joke like, Cameron loves me, but he's obsessed with you, Lisa. Like we have a great relationship, but you are like, I mean, the bond between mother and child it's so real. I know, like, to
Mm,
see that as a dad is just the most beautiful love story to see unfold. And so there were moments when I thought to myself, why did this have to happen to her and not to me? If it's going to happen to somebody, their
mm.
relationship was so close. And because we were staying an hour and a half away, what ended up happening, by the way, was my wife was in the hospital for 2.5 months in Ottawa. A week into her cancer treatment, the biggest risk factor happened, which was there was a massive bleed internally, and it
Wow.
happened in her brain. And
Wow.
she honestly was not supposed to survive. She had life-saving brain surgery, and then was in intensive care for about a week while they weighed their options. The doctors then came to us and said, we're going to give your wife a couple more days, but we do not expect that she's going to live at this point. We could keep her alive for decades, but she would not have the standard of living she would probably want. She, would need to be, in permanent, institutional care, not able to feed herself or take care of her basic needs. That was their prognosis, but they said,
Wow.
We'll help you make that decision when it comes down to it. You will not have to make this call. And
Wow.
it was, I mean, I can still, smell the room I was in intensive care. I can still sit there. Like, I'd love to go back one day and thank the doctors, but I'm not sure I could bring myself back into that place. That was on a Tuesday. On Thursday, they began to bring her out of sedation. And that was the ultimate test, right? If we bring her out of sedation, will her brain swell? Will her brain bleed? Or will she be able to withstand that? And then how bad is the brain damage? They didn't know. They could see it on a map, but they didn't know. And despite this massive block that will always be there in her brain, when they woke her up, she began to respond to commands with basic, like, pressing of thumbs and toes. And by Sunday, the same doctor who had given her basically a death pronouncement was in the room with me and with her best friend as the other doctors removed the breathing tube because she was doing so well she didn't need to be assisted breathing anymore. And I was walking out that day. I was walking out of the hospital room, going back to where we were staying an hour and a half away where our son was. And I said to the nurses, I should have known she was going to pull through. She always had the strongest brain in the family. And I kid you not, Lisa, who would not say a word for 2 or 3 more weeks. She couldn't talk yet. She, didn't have her orientation about her most of the time. But from behind me, from peripheral vision, I see Lisa raise a thumbs up. Like to say, like, yeah, I have the best brain in the family. Like, even then, she was a total smart aleck. And so that began a healing journey that lasted in the hospital for about a month in intensive care, another almost month of cancer care before we could even fly her home to Nashville to continue that care. Then it was a week of inpatient hospital care and then 3 weeks of inpatient rehab. And during that time, in early May of last year, finally, 3 months after the incident, was when Cameron was finally able to see his mom again. And so to get back to that question of how we managed it with him, it was simply, leaning on his skewed sense of time to hope and trust that he wouldn't just think this had been forever, right? And he would say, how's mommy doing? And we'd say, she's still at the doctor. She's still getting better. And what's beautiful about children is they only process information at the speed at which they're ready to do so. And what I learned was not to force conversation about it, to answer his questions and to answer them honestly, if not fully transparently. And then it was interesting because he would ask, like, how's mommy doing? Well, she's still at the doctor. When's she going to come back? Well, we don't know. Look at my train. Or, what color is the sky today? Like, he would bounce back and forth. And what I learned is, of course, he's not equipped for a 10-minute conversation about this or even more than 2 questions. And so we just answered those questions at the pace at which he could handle them. And we took him on all kinds of adventures. I would visit Lisa in the hospital every other day. Her mom would go the days I was not there. And then the other person would stay with Cameron. And those days were therapeutic, just playing with him. And cause he really, he cared, he worried, but at the same time, he couldn't worry 24/7. And when we got locked into that world of playing with him, it helped. It helped at least help us be distracted for a moment.
So was he not able to go and visit her in the hospital, or was that a choice that you guys made for him not to go and see her?
Both. When she was in cancer care, he could not visit. Children aren't allowed in the cancer ward. When it was intensive care, we could have brought him in, but especially early, she was so wired up and hooked up and did not look like herself and had swelling and her head was shaved. And we had decided, even if it came down to a final moment, that he would not come with us, which is a very hard decision to make. But we wanted his memory of her to be in that room in the basement of the cottage, giving his mom a hug, looking and acting, very much like herself. So the first time he was able to visit was in inpatient rehab in Nashville, again, about 3 months after the brain injury. And I didn't know what to expect because at that point, Lisa's short-term memory was really challenged and still is in some ways. It's getting better, but, she's functional, she's independent, she's not going to be able to tell you the 5 things she did yesterday or what's happening today every time. So I wondered what that was going to be like. When he walked in the room, the first thing she said to him in her exact tone of voice she had always used with him was, "Hi, monkey." And that's when I knew this was going to be all right. Because when he walked into that room, he didn't see a cancer patient, a rehab patient, somebody who'd been through hell for the past 3 months. He saw his mom. And she read a book to him. And I thought, you know, whatever else happens, he's going to have a sense of stability from that she is still herself to him. And so that first visit was beautiful. And we spent 2 months in Nebraska doing intensive rehab from May to July of last year. And as much as that benefited Lisa, she actually doesn't remember it. It was 2 months of her life that she just doesn't remember. But it enabled us to spend time together and be a family again. And the biggest thing they encouraged us to do was to go take him on outings with her. And, you know, and she was healthy enough and very much strong enough to walk miles and miles. She could outwalk me at that stage. So we'd go do things together. And in restoring that bond between him and her and trying to just get out of the way during those moments was kind of the biggest rehab benefit, more so than any therapy that she received.
Comes back to that getting out of the way, like we were talking about earlier with the playing as well, of like trying I think as a parent, you think as though you should always have control over every situation and be micromanaging things, but at times we do have to kind of take a step back. But I'm curious, it's obviously, I wouldn't say easy, but obviously now you're able to kind of look back at most of the full picture, let's say, in terms of that decision of not letting him go and see her, or the decision of if there is a final moment, he's not going to be there. Like, you can kind of talk about that now, but what was that like actually going through that? Like, how did you actually keep it together? Because that must have been an up and down, like a back and forth, like, do we, don't we? Like, because those were days, weeks, months of your life that would have felt like decades, I'm sure.
Yeah, very much so. And even looking back on it, and when we first sent Lisa to her rehab in Omaha, it's hard to believe, like, she'd only been 3 months post brain injury at that point. Like, it felt like a year. It did, especially apart from my family and, you know, and friends and being 2,000 miles or 1,000 miles from home. A lot of times the decision, I think we usually felt the decision was made for us. You know, my mother-in-law was really amazing as well at talking through those things. It always felt clear cut that we shouldn't bring him around her based on what he would see and how he might be traumatized. But the implications of the decision were certainly tough to deal with. And I really came to cling to small pleasures, honestly. I'm fairly good at compartmentalizing, and there's no way you can compartmentalize something this big, and I couldn't, and I didn't. But there were moments when I could at least numb the wound a tiny bit with a good podcast on the drive to and from the hospital, that hour and a half, a baseball game on the radio, a conversation with a friend or family. And certainly Cameron was really the best salve for that wound, was just seeing his joy. And there was a delicate balance, because I needed that time with him to refresh and restore my soul, but I could not rely on him for my own sanity and well-being. That's too much pressure to put on a 3 and now 4-year-old kid. And so trying to find the moments of joy and cling to those for my own benefit without putting that pressure on him, that he's still going to be a brat sometimes, because that's what 3-year-olds do. Right.
Yep.
And, there was one moment in particular that it was my birthday and it was Easter as well. And it was the end of the day after I'd gone to see Lisa, and Cameron said something kind of mean to me in the way that a child does when, say, they don't want to go to bedtime, and they don't mean it. And I just broke down and started crying, and he came up and gave me the biggest hug. I was like, oh no, I put that guilt on him. That was on me. I'm not sad because of him. I'm sad because of me. And it was a reminder that in this moment where I'm carrying so much, I'm still carrying him. And I need to carry him and let him hug me versus having him try to carry me. That's too much for a 3 and again, now 4-year-old to bear.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that extends throughout the whole journey of parenting, I'm sure, like kind of having that mentality of, I think it's really important to express to children like how their actions can make people feel. It's like, oh, you said this thing that was rude and mean, like that, it's going to make me feel a bit upset. And like, you kind of you scale it, right? You're like, maybe they have said something very hurtful, but you just explain to them calmly. It's like, hey, that's, that's going to make me feel a bit upset, rather than, bawling your eyes out, or it's like, oh, if you keep doing this thing over and over again, I might start to get a little bit frustrated with you, as opposed to
Yeah.
shouting at them.
Oh, that's so
It's like,
hard too to.
not to say that we haven't all done it. Like, I mean, I've held my hand up, but
Yeah. Yeah, there's that saying too that they're not giving you a hard time; they're having a hard time,
yeah.
and it's so hard. That is so hard, and I've learned now. In the mornings, I need to get up. I need to be well fed. I need to only have one cup of coffee, because if I am hungry, if I am tired, if I'm over caffeinated, I'm much more prone to take those moments personally. Yesterday, he just would not eat his freaking breakfast, and he's always very good at that. Well, his throat hurt. He'd had a cold last week. I should have been patient and understood. He was having a hard time. What I thought to myself instead was, I've got 20 things to do at work. I work with Finns, so I'm up early in the morning working with them, and this is my urgent time to get things done. And I thought about it from my own perspective, as opposed to then zooming out later and saying, he was having a hard time. And so when he got home from school, I said, Cameron, can we cuddle, and can we watch Trains, and can we just relax and have that time together and try to restore? Because I think it's been very easy over the past year, when I've been the primary parent, to let my own frustrations, my own stress and overstimulation get taken out on him. And that's a difficult thing for a child to bear.
But I think so many fathers kind of relate to that and would be in that situation. And then it's just a case of, like you said, kind of like not necessarily trying to right the wrong, because he probably came home from school and like you would have said that, oh, this is because I'm sorry about what happened this morning. Like, well, what happened this morning?
Right.
They often have really short memories anyway.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that we shouldn't be trying to right the wrongs, and just kind of like, and if it feels as though things need to be addressed and explained, then go for it. But yeah, it just seems that being very present and ensuring that we're addressing those things are super important.
Absolutely.
So yeah, how's your wife doing now then? Is how can she, like, in terms of spending time with him, and how, like, is he able to express anything about the situation, about the experience that he went through?
Yeah. She, as we speak right now, she is getting him up and ready for breakfast. She just texted me something funny he said. She'll feed him, she'll get him dressed and ready for school. And, when doctors examine her brain, and she has another test this week, they see major damage. But the important thing is, those doctors reminded us throughout was, we can see one thing medically, but it's clinically, how does the patient actually act, that really matters. And she's working her way back toward driving right now, which is just something we couldn't have comprehended. And we've learned to build in different aids throughout the day for her to help her stay on track, phone alarms, and a whiteboard writing down the calendar and things like that. Things to help her. But with that assistance, she can live a largely independent life and be, the amazing mom that she always has been. She might need a reminder that, hey, it's, 50 degrees outside. He probably doesn't need short sleeves on. Little things like that I would have needed as a dad without any kind of brain injury, before all this. And so he's able to interact with her and love on her. There are residual impacts. I mean, I think I was the primary parent for a year, and he still looks to me now as kind of the primary authority. And I've had to remind him, like, if mom says something, it's gospel. It's the law. Just like if I say something, don't come ask me. If she says no, the answer is no. If she says yes, the answer is yes. And so that leads to moments of some confusion and conflict, when maybe she gives a wrong answer, and I have to gently take her aside and talk about it later. But, other than that delicate balance of trying not to undermine her authority in those moments and trying to work with her, I mean, he has a tremendous relationship with her. The best thing that they've done together is to sit and read together at night. I'll read a book or two to him, but at the end of a long work day, I play, and then I'll read to him, and maybe one book, maybe two books. Her response, she doesn't have the energy to go run circles around with him. So she'll sit down with him for an hour or 45 minutes and read a stack of books. And he has this agenda for her now. He goes to the bedroom, he pulls out like 8 books and plops them on her lap and says, let's go. And that time together is therapeutic for both of them. So he doesn't sit back and talk a lot about what she went through. I don't think he grasps that. What I think he grasps at this stage was there was this really cool time in my life when I lived on an air mattress in Omaha and got to go on train adventures while mommy was getting better. He knows that she was getting better, but I don't think he grasps the depth and seriousness of what she went through, nor should he at that age. Probably he does grasp that this was kind of a cool, unique family time when we all got a little bit closer, and that part of it it's special to see what he's taken away from that experience.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's really interesting, and I think it is always surprising just the processing that kids have and what they understand, and from situations when we might anticipate that they are not able to, like, we see things like they'll forget what's happened in the morning and say, oh, what happened this, we see those things happen. So we assume that they're not able to process these bigger things. But just for example, like today, I took my sons back to this like restaurant that we haven't been for a long time. They've got this like nice play area outside, and like there's a play area inside as well. And I was trying to explain it to him. So we're going to go to this place. We went there like, it was maybe like 9 months ago. It was a really long time ago, maybe a year even. You probably don't remember it. And then he played a bit, and then he remembered that when we were there about a year ago, whenever it was, there was Bluey playing on a big TV inside. I was like, can we go inside and watch Bluey? Like last time. I was just like, how have you remembered that? Like,
it's incredible, isn't it?
I know.
That associative memory. The associative memory is so strong, isn't it? It's like, they don't know what they had for lunch today or what today is, but they know that, exactly. Like they associate so closely. Yeah, I think, and two, I mean, we try not to have a lot of screen time, but the TV is usually on in our house, even if it's just something Lisa and I are watching. The way he remembers commercials is so incredible. Then he'll see a logo on a billboard and sing the commercial jingle. Like, I don't even know what that company is, and you've got the commercial memorized. It's a beautiful, amazing, and hilarious thing to realize what they remember and what they don't.
Definitely. And I think, that's a really nice way of like taking like TV time and any screen time like outside into the real world as well, and like help kind of like grow their understanding and reading and so whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, you're as a man of faith, like what was it like kind of going through this process kind of personally? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it helped my theology evolve a bit. In that, I've always believed that God, allows bad things to happen to us. He doesn't cause the bad thing. He doesn't impose the bad thing. We live in a screwed up world where, people do terrible things and terrible health things happen. And I think my theology more than ever now, though, is stuff happens and then God helps us pick up the pieces. And, I think also the idea that prayer is not in itself necessarily going to say change God's mind about something, but prayer prepares us for the action we need to take or for the posture we need to be in to receive help. And I think, prayer also reinforces our own strength when it's coming from other people. I think the act of telling somebody sincerely that you are praying for them or even praying with them, to me, is as empowering as just thinking maybe that prayer is taking place. I think there were so many people in our journey who said, I'm praying for you and I'm bringing you a meal and I'm writing you this note and I'm going to check in with you tomorrow and see how you're doing. And it's the second part of that I think matters as much as the prayer. But the prayer is the foundation of it. Right. And honestly, I can't say that I sat down and was praying for my wife all the time, as bad as that sounds. I think I was so in it that when it was time to leave the hospital, when it was time to, do whatever, like I was having conversations with friends and family. I was talking to people who I could hear back from, and it was their prayers and their encouragement. And I think the reservoir of prayer and strength that maybe I, had been built up in me through being raised in faith that guided me as much as it was me sitting down for 20 minutes and praying at the end of a really tough day at the hospital. It was, I think God revealed himself through the actions of others. He revealed himself through the strength that he'd instilled in me and others close to Lisa. And he revealed himself through the inspiration that Lisa continues to be. And so I think, in some ways, God is a lot more tangible to me now than he was. I see prayer differently as a precursor to action versus necessarily, being, something that changes things on its own. I believe God can do what he wants, but I believe he uses us and he uses those around us to accomplish that. And, it's the equivalent, I guess, of you see somebody who's struggling on a street corner And, you can pray for them, and that's great, but that doesn't feed them. Can I also buy them a coffee? Can I also buy them
Yeah.
something to eat? I think there were so many people in my life who bought me something to eat, if you will, in that moment, who gave me some nourishment in some way or another, even from 1,000 miles away. And so I think my faith now is stronger because stuff happens, and it doesn't make me bitter that this happened to my wife. I think this was just a medical fluke versus somehow God's plan. I think God's plan is not some overarching diagram in the sky. God's plan is us. We are God's plan. We are his plan A, B, and C for being there for each other. We are his vessels and his tools. And I think I was more emboldened and affirmed than ever that so many people in Lisa's life who have now become my close friends, and so many of my close friends and family came to our aid and were those hands and feet of God.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say hands and feet. I was just thinking about, we're called to be the body of Christ. And I've always reminded people, like, if you break your hand or if you break your leg, you don't expect it to keep doing the same amount of work that it's been doing. You put it in a cast, you put it in a sling, and you let it heal, and your other body parts have to help out.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like when someone goes through these really tough times. Is like the other body parts are going to have to help out what's broken and what needs healing. But yeah, that's a really nice kind of tangential way, like a really, what's the right word? Practical kind of takeaway from it, I think, for anyone who's listening who maybe isn't someone of faith, someone who believes in Jesus, that these, you can't, like, this is a story that you can't like argue with. This is like, you Wes are able to take this away from this situation. And I think that's a beautiful kind of like summary to have of looking back on that, on leaning on prayers of others, actions of others at a time when it is, that would be a tough time for anybody, whether they've got faith or not. So thank you for sharing.
Of course. And at that time, I didn't care what a given friend or family believed. I cared about how they demonstrated it. And I think it's a reminder to me now that, especially in a world where we're very polarized and where many Christians are known more for their words than their actions, unfortunately, at this point, like, where can I be that light, not just try to speak that light into existence? Where can I live that light? And living is a much more powerful testament. And I think Jesus showed us that in his life as well, right? Associating himself with the outcast, bringing love and bringing hope and mercy triumphing over judgment, as it says in the book of James. I think living that mercy and living that love versus trying to proselytize or trying to, just act morally strong. Like, it's about how the best illustration of faith and demonstration of faith is showing up for somebody, regardless of what you or they may believe.
Amen. That's awesome, man. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for saying. So, final episode. That's not the right thing to say. The final question of every episode that we try. Oh, it's been a long day for me. It feels like it hasn't, but it feels like it has. The final question of each episode is taking time to reflect back on before you became a father. So, do you think Wes from just over 4 years ago would have needed to have? What piece of advice do you think he could have heard before becoming a dad for the very first time?
That's a great question. Practice overstimulation, and learn how to calm yourself and be your best self while overstimulated. They say that being a parent is easy. Doing literally anything else while being a parent is hard. And of course, I think we'd all quibble with being a parent being easy all the time. But the point stands that it's trying to be productive. I asked my therapist a few weeks ago. I said, how can I be present with my kid, productive, and positive? And he said, I hope that's not why you're coming to therapy, because the answer is you can't. Like, you have to choose. And I think, they're when you're hunting and killing, if you will, and I mean that like in a work sense or in a productivity sense, you're not in a loving place. And when you're loving, it's hard to be in a hunting and killing place. And right now at this stage of life, I'm getting off a call with you. I'm going to answer 4 emails, and I'm going to go feed my kid, breakfast and get him off to school. I'm going to go volunteer with Lisa. Like, there's a lot of loving and a lot of hunting that has to happen in a short time span. And I think what I would have prepared myself for, I think as a pre-dad, is doing the calisthenics, if you will, doing the practice of dealing with distraction well and thriving amidst it. And I don't always do that well today. If I especially am over caffeinated or underfed, like, anything that's going to trigger the anxiety that much more, So that's something that I would have told myself then and continue to need to tell myself. And it's the number one topic when I go to therapy, once a month or so, is like, how can I maintain my own goodness and kindness that I would strive for? And frankly, just not be a butthole to my kid and my wife when I'm stressed. So that's the advice I would have given myself. I think is prepare for overstimulation and prepare for being your best self. Not 100% of the time, that's not possible, but the vast majority of the time.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that. I think just managing those emotions of when that overstimulation comes and ensuring that that the outburst or that the outcome, let's say, isn't then directed at the children, because it's tough. So if you do get the answer, if there is one key main answer to that conundrum, do let me know. I'm not sure there is a main answer. I think, like you said, it's probably just a lot of practice and going over and over and over again. But
and a waffle in the mornings. Eat a waffle. That's my best solution, is have a little something to eat. Have some protein. Because I just, there was an old commercial here in the States. You're not you when you're hungry. That's true.
Yeah.
Be fed, be nourished. Nourish yourself before you can nourish your kid, because you're going to have to be ready for whatever they bring.
Definitely. Well, Wes, thank you so much for coming on, sharing with us.
Thank you.
I've really appreciated hearing from you today here on the Dad Dialogue podcast.
Thank you, Laurence, and best of luck to Newcastle here for the rest of the season.
And good luck to Arsenal in the Champions League. And there we have another Dad Dialogue conversation. Of course, a massive thank you goes out to Wes for coming on the show and sharing his stories with us. As I said in the intro, I found it super valuable to have these sorts of conversations. They're not always easy conversations to have, maybe not the sorts of things that you might talk to your friends or your family about when they're going through these sorts of things. And there we have another Dad Dialogue conversation. Of course, a massive thank you goes out to Wes for coming on the show and sharing his stories with us. As I said in the intro, I found these sorts of stories and conversations super valuable just to have a better understanding of the world and of how to communicate with people. And these sorts of conversations might not happen, when you're just kind of talking to someone that you've first met or maybe an acquaintance. So I do think these conversations are super valuable. And as I said, I'm not hoping that this situation goes on to anyone, but hearing how someone has come through tough times, I think is a really valuable thing to help us build up our own understanding of the world and preparation for the world and providing for our families emotionally and so on and so on. So yeah, massive thank you to Wes. Reminder, you can go over to daddialogue.co.uk if you'd like to get in touch with the show, share your story, share your thoughts with us. You can also sign up to be a guest yourself on a future episode. Thanks so much for being with us today. I hope you have a great day, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Goodbye.